Bring it here.
Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. Joining us from an undisclosed location, not his usual place in the Pacific Northwest, Milton Elms fanboy Joel Rawlings. Joel, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm doing really well. Appreciate that intro too. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Are you filming kind of a documentary? Are you in Eastern Oregon trying to, find the roots of Milt and
No, I got enough of those dang stories built up in my head. I'm on the
That's right.
West Coast trying to purge any of those memories.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, we're just right on the ocean. It's pretty cool. It's nice, but everyone's asleep behind me, so I'm trying to keep it on the minimum. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like when you're running like your dungeon master kind of stuff in your mom's basement here like this, is it like the same group of friends from high school, or do you have like a
No,
whole
middle
new
school.
group of people?
Yeah,
Okay,
middle school.
excellent.
Yeah, because
Awesome.
that was when I got into D&D.
Yeah,
Actually, to be very technical, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition.
sure. Yeah.
As I prefer the 5th edition rules. I think the Wizards of the Coast, they were really like, that was the year that they really fine-tuned things. I think in subsequent editions, like some of the stuff they've changed with the D20, it's just like it doesn't quite fit the way that particular particular one did. So that's what I
So,
prefer.
so if you're looking for sponsorship, you'd think Mountain Dew, Cheetos, and Bad Decisions would all be looking for someone to brand
That's right.
their
That's right.
products. Yeah,
Or
that'd
Wizards of the Coast. Guys, if you're
that
out
would
there,
be
if you're listening to this,
beauty.
just think about it. Just think about sponsoring my
Mhm.
campaign.
All right.
Joining us from his usual location in the Gulf LSC, Erik Weiken. Erik, how are you?
Doing pretty well, thanks. Good to get away for a bit.
Yeah, back home. So listen, guys, we're going to get right into it. Let's talk about NCAAs, just as we did with the women's meet a week ago. We'll go men's meet, one event reactions. Then we'll look back on the women's meet. Obviously, we can talk a little bit. I had Danny Corman from Cal on the podcast just a couple days ago. So there's some color to add to our discussion there. But just having watched the 800 freestyle relay, Erik, let me start with this. Does it ever get old watching guys go 129 in the 200 freestyle?
Absolutely not. My only complaint is I wish the camera would have been on his side of the pool because
Seriously.
him and Shane Casas were both out there, and the difference maker was that last 50, which could very well just be experience in his 500 focus relative to Shane. That was an incredible race to watch, and if that's any indication of where those guys are going to be and where Shane's going to be this week, it's going to be incredible. And no disrespect to the other relays, they both had guys that looked great. Cal is firing on all cylinders, it seems. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen here. So.
What do you think, Joel? Or is this going to be it's going to be weak for the Cal men? We didn't really do NCAA predictions for the men's side, or is Eddie Reese, just spending another year transferring his consciousness to an AI so he can continue to win NCAA championships for another 50 years?
Oh man, such a fun race to watch. Especially when it's at this level. And it's so weird how it's two different races. Like when you have like the level I was used to being at, where like the inter-free relay, it's like,
Right.
All right, I can go get coffee, come back, and we'll get to the second swimmer. And this is like, it's so exciting how it's going back and forth like this. The leadoff swims is amazing. I really think, Texas just looks so strong right now. But I think that final day of the meet, I think that's kind of when their depth, their strength in all those top 8 swimmers have. I think Cal's going to still kind of squeak it out, but it's going to be a heck of a great meet, I think.
Yeah, I think just based off of how well those two teams swam right off the bat, like it actually looks like it could be a very competitive start to finish. Now, just we are looking at like Texas is going to have that diving advantage. I think maybe Cal will have enough swimming to make up for it. Like I would love to just see sort of a wire to wire battle because it's not something we often get at the NCAA level. Like, too often it's sort of like determined. too early in the meet, or somebody builds kind of an insurmountable lead. So it's really, I think, fun if we could just get something that's really competitive between those two teams, and basically both teams performing really well. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts as we look forward? What are you guys looking for here on the first day? Erik, anything big that you're going to be watching over the course of the weekend?
I mean, watching to see what happens. So the Luca Orlando scratch from the 2IM, does that put him in all 5 relays? What does that do for Georgia? He had a solid 800-free relay, so it'd be interesting to see how he does. He has plenty of international experience already, but I don't know if a team race like the NCAA's has really ever come across his experience, so we'll see how that goes, but he's already doing really well. And then just starting the week for what could be, 3 records for Shane Casas. That 2IM is coming up first, going 130.5 into 200 free. So the 200 seems to be solidly there. And how much faster is Kieran Smith going to go?
Right. Yeah. I'm quite curious. I hadn't really put it together until Sun published an article. This kid from Virginia Tech, Yusuf Ramadan, how much progress he's made. Obviously, he's a freshman international, so it's a little bit misleading to look at like how much progress he's made short course yards. Obviously, you're not going to like your first short course yard swim to your last when you're somebody coming from abroad. You should have some improvement, but still the kid started the year at like a 47, and then now he's 44 low in the 100 fly, and he's 18 years old. It's just incredible. I'm really curious to see what happens there. I'm really curious to see whether Cal can translate that 200 backstroke dominance that they had. Like, how many scorers are they going to be able to put up here as we go to the NCAA meet? Because it's obviously it's hard to score at the NCAA meet. And I'm curious to see too, with the women's side, like we saw still some really excellent top end performances. Depth was for the first time in a long time, there was sort of a depth regression in terms of what it took to, finish in 16th place at the women's meet. So I'm very curious to see whether we see a similar phenomenon at the men's meet here in this year of COVID. Joel, anything else you're looking for?
Yeah, everything that Erik said, especially, I thought that was really great. The Texas A&M IM, but like Louisville, like their relays and what they do, it's always fun to watch that. They always like outkick their coverage. Whatever they come in at, they seem to really put it together at this meet. It's also cool seeing like Notre Dame doing really well. It's not a place I always thought of it as like, elite swimming. And so it's cool to see these other programs like that they're doing so well. So I like watching kind of the underdogs a little bit too. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Shout out to Mike Litzinger too, because he, the coach of Notre Dame, he's been really helpful to me. I've been corresponding with him a little bit back and forth because here on Wahoo's, I help kids with the recruiting process, help give them information. And he's been really, really good about just like, letting me use him basically as a case study, like, hey, what does it take to get to Notre Dame? What kind of considerations do you take and stuff? And he's been doing this like while his NCAA season is, coming to a conclusion. So respect to Mike Litzinger for
they're doing fantastic. Yeah, really good work there
for those results. Okay, let's look back at the women's meet because obviously Virginia won. They're the first ACC school to do it. What did we come up with? Not necessarily East Coast, but like the farthest Northeast team to win a women's NCAA championship. As you look back on it, like I could go back to you first, Joel. Like what's your impression of this women's NCAA meet? What are you going to remember in 10 years about this one?
I think that the thing that's pretty cool is like for them to win for the first time, it's so dominant. Where it was just like top 8 every event. Relay is just top 3 every single relay. I thought that's amazing. So it wasn't like, man, they've been fighting for so long from third to second to first, and here they are. It's like out of nowhere all of a sudden top 8 every event. To come out that dominant, that was amazing. And obviously with NC State, and so that kind of coaching tree go 1-2 like that is pretty interesting. I thought like with Cal, be interesting to obviously be there, like with an experienced coach like Coach Foreman and Coach McKeever, where you have a relay that disqualifies like that, and how disheartening that is. But to keep rallying and keep on coming back. And I kind of looked at that swim as kind of like in Tin Cup, where it's like everything you see at Virginia is like they're going to win the meet. Cal's got a really good chance of coming in second. Just lay it up. Then hit the green, go for 3. But they're like, no, going for the win. And it's awesome that like that. And I think that's one of those things that kind of gets overlooked. It's like, really, they could have just laid it up. Safe starts the whole way. We'll just kind of go for second. It's like, now we're going for the win. And I think that's awesome. And it's something I think that a lot of coaches aren't going to look at that way, but I really appreciate it, and I really respect what they do too. And just, again, when things are rolling and your kids are all top 8, I mean, that's obviously a great job coaching, but also that job coaching they have to do when your kids are going to be a little bit disappointed after a relay, because that's something where I'm sure the whole side of the bench, like, it's just gut shot, and to be able to go, hey, we got a few more days of this meet, let's bring it back. That's just amazing as well.
Yeah, it's certainly can't understate too how well NC State swam to get second. And I mean, in just like their level of performance with the right talent there, like that's an NCAA championship team, I mean, like, so, and I think that's kind of an important milestone, even though they didn't win, for NC State, in the sense that, they've proved themselves at the ACC level, but I think Braden and his staff, they've got to be thinking, like, how can we push it, to that next level? How can we make the NCAA? First thing we got to do is we got to make the NCAA championship our highest level of performance of the year. It can't be the ACC meet. It's got to be the NCAA championship. Yep. That's a really, really, really hard leap to make as a coaching staff. And, it seems like this year they made it, and maybe they laid a foundation for something in the future. Erik, what did you see both at the top and then maybe look a little bit downstream at the NCAA meet?
Just looking at the change in some of the programs you guys already talked about, Virginia and NC State, and just the progression. Now, last year we had that obvious pause and everything, but looking at, like, I pulled up 2019 and Virginia was 6th and NC State was 7th, in 2019. And this year they're 1st and 2nd. Texas moved up a few spots. Stanford has been a little bit depleted by COVID and people delaying. So next year is certainly going to be different when you're bringing in the kind of recruiting class they are, but Virginia's not slowing down. So it just seems to be kind of a big thing that's going to be culminating over the next couple of years is, with your pod with Danny, and they are bringing in 14 freshmen. So it's like, what are they going to be like year 1 and then year 2? And then as Virginia's classes kind of come through and see how they progress. And I mean, that's the top end is going to be a really interesting scenario over the next couple of years, and will Stanford's continued depth in performance and being able to recruit to storybook land that is Stanford's campus, is that going to be able to hold up to what's going on out east? And then down the line, I mean, we're seeing some programs in transition. Ohio State had a really strong season with Big Tens. Can they start to make a considerable push consistently? Indiana maybe took a little bit of a step back results-wise, but are they reloading? I mean, they had some heavy hitters, and now they're gone. So it's and then what's come of Kentucky? Are we going to see this SEC championship build? What's going to happen over the next 3-4 years? So all stuff that seems to be kind of baking as we go through here the next couple of recruiting cycles. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that this 2-year gap, I just think like typically from year to year in the NCAAs, something that's maybe more frustrating in terms of swimming is how intractable it sort of seems where teams finish. And this extra year and everything, all the other circumstances, it did introduce some instability to where we saw, like, I think there's just much more dramatic shifts in how teams did. I mean, I was really shocked when I was talking to Danny on the podcast for her to say, you know, we were the only, I forget what terminology you use, podium or like, you know, trophy team or whatever from the last NCAA championships that was still there. So I think we're looking like top 5 teams. They were the only one that was still in the top 5, right?
Yep.
So that's like a crazy amount of instability. Typically, like, you know, if you have a team that finishes that high, you know, even in the next year, they're going to be pretty close to that level. But things are just way more volatile than they normally are. And I wonder how that's going to reflect looking forward.
Definitely. I think the thing is with how recruiting is, because I thought you were kind of leading into where recruiting was going.
Yeah.
Where now it becomes one of those deals where, you know, it used to be their visit was such a big deal because you're trying to get into signs. Like now they're already committed. The visit now is just a formality. It's kind of like now you're kind of picking your roommate because you're already coming. And so for these coaches to be kind of prognosticators, like 2 years down the line, I think you're going to do this. You know, and so they have to be right with this because you're tying up your money for the future. And you look at like all these freshmen, I think Erik last week said all these freshmen, sophomores in these events packing into the top 8. If you were wrong in a recruiting class, just like what will happen is you, like you said, that you go from first, second, all of a sudden you're 8th, 9th in 1 year. And that's never happened before. But I wonder how much of that is because of how recruiting is now. Where you're betting on futures. You're hoping that this person pans out in 2 years from now, and you're hoping that, you know, what could be kind of the start of a bubble where this kid is really good in this, but all of a sudden, like behind that recruiting class, there's a bunch of 49s and 48s coming. And if you didn't get one of those 49s, now you're out because that relay, you know, hinges so much, especially like on breaststroke. You know, 101 a couple of years ago was kind of a big deal on a relay. Now, if you don't have a 59, back to breast, now all of a sudden you're in turbulent water and that relay's out of it already, you know? And so that's the thing is if you're wrong on one kid, that could knock you right out of that podium, like you're saying.
Yeah, it does make that 00 that you coached in Division III look less and less impressive every year.
Petty,
the way things
insignificant.
Exactly. And things have moved in breaststroke.
Yeah.
But nice segue to recruiting, because here's what I want to talk about, guys. You know, there's a section at the end of the podcast where I ask Danny what she sees as sort of different in the way of recruiting. And I thought she gave a pretty interesting answer. And she's a little bit more diplomatic about it than I'm about to be. And I sort of tried to jump in even as she was giving it to sort of stake out a position. And I'm going to take an even stronger one here. So we've praised Todd.
Hot take. Can you put like a hot take thing, Kevin?
I know. Yeah. Look, once we get that A3 sponsorship, Joel, for your sweater that you're wearing, I think we're going to be able to afford maybe an editor to put like the hot take, you know,
nice.
Image, flash that across the screen. But look, here's one thing I do think. I think that the underrated, like you're never going to read about this on SwimSwam, okay? But the underrated piece of the rise of NC State, the rise of UVA is Braden Holloway, and I can guess probably a big chunk of his coaching tree, utilizes a particular strategy in recruiting. And it's one that I don't agree with. There's nothing about it that's against the rules in the NCAA, but just because something is against the rules doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. And I'll again, I explained it a little bit on the podcast, but I'll sort of explain it here and then I'll let you guys react. And I first came up against this when I was coaching at Georgia Tech. Braden was at Virginia Tech at that time. So we had a ton of recruiting crossover. And I don't believe that he does this with the top end. Like you think about the fastest kids that are going to NC State or Virginia, but we'd be sort of like recruiting along, we'd be talking to them. Virginia Tech's talking to them. They make a visit there first or whatever. And as far as I knew, everything was going normal in recruiting. And then like all of a sudden one day I'd get a call from a kid and they'd just be like, I committed to Virginia Tech. Coach called me on the phone, offered me a scholarship and said basically like if I didn't decide by the end of the day, it was gone. Okay. And so they use this sort of pressure tactic. And I think if I'm trying to make the most generous explanation for it, and it's not like, look, when I look in the mirror, like I used deadlines with kids. Did I use a tonight or it's gone deadline? No. Did I use like you have the weekend? No. In fact, typically what I would do at the end of Georgia Tech I would go, hey, I think we're going to offer you a scholarship pretty soon. And when we do that, you're going to have a certain amount of time to say yes or no to that. And usually it was somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks. So I'm not saying, you can't do that. Danny says she's not doing that at all. But I think that they have really capitalized, I think, to build a lot of depth on their teams with this kind of tactic. So what do you think, Erik? I'll let you go first. First off, as a club coach, at being on the other side of this, like, have you encountered this kind of tactic throughout NCAA swimming, and what do you think?
Yeah, there's only been a couple of instances where I've had this. I've had a lot of kids look at D2, D3, a couple of just walk on at mid-major and D1, so it wasn't really a common thing for me. I did have a couple of instances with D1 programs where it was, you have to the end of the week. Here's your offer. It's Monday. You have until Friday or Saturday, so you got about 6 days to make this decision. Another one where there was a specific percentage that was offered, and the longer you waited, the less likely you were to get that entire percentage or get it at all. So, I find it particularly interesting giving, I guess, the status of the programs and where they were, where it was like not really able to make such a power play. Not to say that you can't be aggressive or strong on recruiting, but at the same time, it's like you're not really in a place to make these kinds of demands versus a top level program, and just like this is the clout that you carry. But I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that tactic. I guess the further they get along with Virginia and NC State, they have this established success. They'll never have to really worry about those kinds of deadlines ever again, and just maybe be able to pick up some of those extra pieces along the way. They'll want to go to Virginia just to go to Virginia, like somebody might at Cal and pay full weight, or Stanford or stuff like that. But I certainly appreciate Cal's approach, because you can maybe pick up some of the very few, I guess, would be late bloomers on the girls' side, where somebody gets cast aside by one of those programs who takes that tactic, and all of a sudden 6 months later, that 5,300 freestyler is now 50 point, and they've been cast aside. You pluck them and make them a 48 or 47. So
right. I do think too, something that you reference here that I think is really important understanding this is, like, I also wonder, look, the other part of this, I hear about all this secondhand. So I'm not in on any of these conversations. I don't know exactly how it's phrased, the pressure, right? Because there's also a heavy level of implied pressure. Like, I just know if I was getting a scholarship offer from Cal, I would know that they're also recruiting a lot of other people, and that if I were not to say yes, I have to imagine you understand that they could just offer that money to another person, and then the scholarship offer might not be there by the time you decide.
I don't know.
Explicitly telling you that it will be there whenever you decide. What do you think?
You're looking at it again from your perspective. So like, most of the time a rational human being, I'm guessing, in your day-to-day life.
Maybe that's arguable.
But now you take it back a level again, where a high school kid. I don't know if they always think that way, and so that's why I appreciate obviously what Cal does. It gives them a little more time, but I totally get where it'd be like, listen, this is what you do. It's like you've got 24 hours, 48 hours. I worked at a university that had a Hall of Fame Division I basketball coach, and he would bring the basketball players in. They'd stay at a hotel. They wouldn't even stay on campus. They'd be there for the amount of time. Then before they leave, we're going to sit down. Here's your offer. You going to take this or not? No, it's like, tell you what, you go home, you think about it, you got 12 more hours, let me know. Otherwise, it'll be on the table until we give it to someone else. And so they would just point blank tell people it's going to go to someone else. And we kind of look at that like when we're coaching club or something like that. This is a 17-year-old or now a 16-year-old person or girl or boy. You can't do that to them. It's like from their perspective, it's like I've got 50 other recruits. I need to make decisions. I need to know, and we need to know early, especially now you see like swim, college swimming, all these things. Here's the picture. Everyone kind of signed kind of a LeBron James, taking my talents to South Beach. Kind of thing. Everyone wants to get their picture up there. You want to be in that cycle where you've got your kid up there. We've got another recruit. We got another recruit. This is the place to be. You want another recruit. And you only have so much money. You got, 14 scholarships on the women's side. You want to know who's coming in and who's not because you're putting together relays. You're putting together, again, like these teams looking a year or two in advance of where they can move up from 8th to 1st. They're putting together their teams that minute. So from their perspective, I get it. You've got men's and women's teams combined. They've got a lot of moving parts going, and they need to know kind of as early as possible. And it's unfortunate it is that it's pressuring 16-year-olds into making decisions that quickly that's really life-altering decisions. But that's kind of how Division I swimming is right now. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's how you have to be.
Yeah.
It's younger than that now, too. I mean, you look at Auburn's class when it was like, think about being a recruit and committing sophomore, junior year. And by the time you're supposed to step foot off campus your freshman year, the entire staff has changed and 50% of the kids have graduated. It's not even the same team that you were recruited from.
No,
so it's such a crazy situation. And yeah, I don't disagree that some of the tactics are necessary, like you said, for having to get at some of that talent that's out there. At the same time, it's just like such a crazy relationship that each have with the same situation of recruiting. It's so different. Talking to a 15-year-old about making a life decision, they can't even drive yet. They could.
I also think Joel sort of referenced this, but I want to expand upon it a bit, that there's an aspect of this that is so where the experience and power in the situation is so inverted. So like when you think about a experienced college swim coach, somebody who's been recruiting for 10, 15, 20 years, making a scholarship offer to the athlete, that person has done that kind of, the coach has done that negotiation hundreds of times. They have a lot of experience in doing this. The athlete, this may be the only time they ever have to do a negotiation. Maybe the first time in their life that they're going to do this type of negotiation. And that's just like such a heavy inversion. And so like, that's where morally, I think it gets into a gray area for me, because to take advantage of that inversion, I can't agree with it. Like I can't find myself agreeing with it. So for all the other praise I want to give, like I don't think that I just don't think it's right.
I think as a coach, we sit there like going from the college side now it's hard to look at people as individuals when you're recruiting almost. Not that like, they take up,
it's a little dehumanizing. Yeah.
But it comes to a point like especially in that point of the season when its signing period is coming up where you're like, I want a yes or a no. And either of them, I'll be more happy with the yes, but I'd be just as happy with the no right now instead of the I don't know, because I've got to keep on calling and emailing and doing all this stuff versus I just need a decision. And I think that becomes the thing is like the more stressed we become, just everyone does this, is we start to get a little focused on what we have to do ourselves and we take it out of that. And so to be able to sit there and keep on going, it's okay, take a little more time. it's hard to do too. And so it's, I definitely see where you're coming from. It is a big decision, and it's adults in the room kind of thing. But again, that's how the system has become. And so these are people that are trying to make a living in the system. It's like NCAA needs to make a change on that is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. All right. It's we've talked through that enough. I think it's time for our parting shots. I think, is that what they called it on the Sports Reporters? I need to look this up one time before we do this.
On Family Guy, it's what grinds my beans, I think, isn't it?
Oh,
what grinds
right.
my gears.
Sorry. What grinds my
gears?
What grinds my gears? So, Erik, what's grinding your gears this week?
I really don't have a lot that's grinding my gears right now, to be honest with you. Like, I'm one of the few fortunate people that
you got your rush shirt on?
Yeah, man. As soon as this is off, the record's going on, and I'm just gonna rock out and do my computer work the rest of the day for Speedo here. No, I don't really have a lot that's bothering me. I guess the biggest thing that I'm kind of coming back to is getting back into the podcasts that I listen to that don't involve swimming. So I've had a couple of these little parting shots here where I've talked about going elsewhere. If you are into hyper niche kind of stuff, and if you're into food and you haven't listened to the Dave Chang show, I'm going to do a little spot out for them. It is a very specific group of people that this show is going after. So if you're really into food, it's a fun podcast to listen to. They have another one where it's called Recipe Club, where they just pick a recipe and 3 different people in 3 different places try to do it. Dave Chang tries to do it in a microwave, and he is a Michelin star rated chef and multi-restaurateur. So yeah, I've just been catching up on that and listening to that to just kind of disconnect from the swimming world and the world of bathing suits and swim caps and t-shirts. So that's all I got.
Joel, how about you? What's grinding your gears?
I'm like Erik. I'm just a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. I don't know what you mean.
That's great.
I think the thing I was thinking about was like with coaching, like I have this one kid I used to coach. He's now coaching. He's like, I really want to coach Division I. That's where I want to be. I want to be coach. And he just would keep on texting me. He's like, what does it take? So in a text, because that's all you get. And I can't keep up with those. And like, it's easy to become a Division I coach. You just have to give up everything. It's no problem at all. There it is. Give up everything. It's like, okay, I can do that. And it's like when you're 21, 22, that's the deal. It's like you can go, here's the time reservoir because my time is worthless. I'm going to go 24/7. No problem.
Yeah.
And I look at those Big Ten coaches, the combined teams where you go, you've got the men's meet Big Tens, you got women's Big Ten, then all of a sudden you got women's nationals, and you got men's nationals. That's a month of like, hotel rooms. I mean, sure, you've got soaps to last you a lifetime. I mean, I'm still working through soaps, and I was a crap Division III coach. They got soaps and towels forever, but it's like that's a month away from your family, a month away from everything, and then you get back on Monday. It's like, oh, by the way, you still have your paperwork. You've got all your travel expense reports. They got to be due. And what I've seen is like you can be the greatest coach in the world, but if you're not getting your travel expense reports in, there's a good chance you're going to get fired, And it just like that one recruit you bring in, all of a sudden you bring in a bad recruit, you can get fired. A million things right, and it's like all you do is you screw up one little thing because you're exhausted. That's not going to fly. And the lifestyle is really pretty hard. And what the coaches have done with COVID this year, the extra hours that they've had to put in, the extra paperwork they've had to put in, it's amazing. And really hats off to the people that can do it. But it's one of those deals I remember when I was coaching where it gets to the point where you're sitting there on deck coaching and you're thinking, I got to be recruiting. And then all of a sudden you're like, God, I also have to be there. I have a son. I've got to be home for my kids, and then you're home with your kids. You're like, God, I really should be calling that recruit pretty soon. Like, the decision time is coming up too. And so you're never in one place. You're always half in one place, half in another place. And it's a pretty hard thing to do. And I think that's the thing is right now it's definitely kind of a sport for younger people because you really do. It seems like you have to give up a heck of a lot right now for Division I.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think I can't name a Division I coach I know who isn't extremely stressed this year, that their stress level is just like through the roof, the way this past year has been. So you're probably not far off by your estimation. Actually, you're not far off at all with somebody who's just trying to get in. Yeah, like just give up everything, and then you can go be a volunteer somewhere and find a way to scrape by, and maybe you'll get your foot in the door. And that's basically it. All right. So just like I'm going to follow in the vein of Erik, and I'm going to really come out of left field, with something that I'm consuming outside of necessarily the sport of swimming, although it does sort of come back as with everything with me. I just love swimming too much. So, things weave its way back into it. I have been consuming as a guilty pleasure a YouTube channel, has a ridiculous name.
Jake Paul.
No, it's called More Plates, More Dates. As far as I can tell, it's a man in his mid to late 20s, Canadian man who's a amateur bodybuilder. Okay. And the first one of these videos I consumed was, and he's got like seemingly an endless supply of this, is basically, was X celebrity that you've seen like just look ripped out of their mind in some movie on like anabolic agents of some sort. And it's just like he's basically like a meathead scholar. Like the guy has obviously taken a lot of these things himself, experimented quite a bit. He seems to have like an encyclopedic knowledge of reading somebody's blood panel and like looking for all these markers that they've done this and that and the other thing, and what it does to change your appearance here and there and stuff. I cannot stop watching, like him suppose what cycle is The Rock on, to balloon to 275 pounds at age 48. Because look, I don't think any of us are under any illusions that were The Rock to be drug tested, he would come up 100% clean. But it also, to bring it back seriously to the field of swimming, because he does, once you branch out, like once you get into the second layer from the celebrity videos, he gets into some MMA stuff and some sports where there is drug testing. And he does a pretty convincing job revealing how athletes can get around drug testing. And it's really made me sort of reconsider. I'd always heard like, oh yeah, but the people on the bleeding edge, they're way ahead of the testing, and now more than ever, I'm convinced that there are people that are way ahead of the testing. And that's a sobering thought. It's not a wonderful thing to think about, but More Plates, More Dates, ridiculous name, but the content itself is actually quite educational.
I think the thing is, after Lance Armstrong and everything, it's like now everyone is kind of like under that kind of scrutiny, because that was the thing, is like you wanted to believe so much. It's like, sure, everyone else is cheating, but he's beating. So you're a lot better naturally than everyone else that's cheating. Right. I believe it. And then all of a sudden, oh no, how can it be? And so, every sport now, it's even our sport swimming, we want to think that it's not like that, but it's like, so let's see, this guy's kicking the heck out of everyone else and they're all cheating. Just good coaching. We're good. Right. It can't be. It just can't be.
Right. He does a lot of that too, like with where he, takes some fitness personality and he's like, okay, so you're completely natural, but yet you're 45 years old and you're like more ripped than professional bodybuilders. Right. Really? Like who we know are using X and Y and Z to be absolutely as muscular and ripped and shredded as they possibly can. You are? Really? You're really
just a genetic anomaly.
Oh yeah, you must be just like, the 0.0001% percentile of muscle building potential, or maybe just maybe you're also injecting a little bit of extra help. And it's actually made me feel a little bit better about my COVID-20 that we discussed before we started recording here. Because I can tell you I'm 100% natural myself. And I don't think anybody's going to question that on here. Guys, thank you for joining me. Thanks for discussing all this stuff. And I look forward to talking to you again next week.